Hello and welcome to the first episode of a new series called Media Will Eat Itself, a podcast that showcases the people behind modern content creation, exploring the fuzzy boundaries between shifting skill sets and traditional expectation. Each week we'll talk about loads of media skills with a special guest. Topics will include videography, podcasting, editing, copywriting, design, photography, branding, and so much more. It's a media show about media people, and I'm your host, Shaun Weston. Today we're discussing the ins and outs of writing your first book with Duena Blomstrom, someone I've known for a few years in the world of financial technology and banking. Duena's first book is coming out in April 2018, so I thought it would be a good time to catch up for a chat, to find out what went through her head other than a few thousand words. So we hooked up on Skype, had a great conversation, and we came out with a few nuggets of insight and wisdom that I hope you'll find very useful.
So I'm Duena Blomstrom. I am the creator and author of Emotional Banking. And I have worked in technology for the last 22 years.
All right, you're going to have to explain now what is emotional banking and also what is FinTech.
Good, very good questions. One of them is even better than the other one. FinTech, to my mind, is anything in technology at the intersection of technology and finance. So essentially any type of software, hardware, systems, people that are needed to make financial services work. And emotional banking is quite far from that definition, but to my mind is a collection of methods that will make fintech better by making its people up to scratch in terms of technology and ways of work.
And that's your niche, isn't it? That's what you specialize in this industry.
Right. So I came up with this concept a few years ago while I was working in another technology company, and I realized that it's needed. So I've just created this niche, which is essentially the bit that looks at the culture of a bank and how that can affect the way that they are able to adopt technology.
Yeah, it's kind of the human side that a lot of big businesses sort of forget about, right?
Right, it's the people, not tech side. It's the fluffy side, if you wish, the flowery, fluffy side, and I get a lot of that, to be honest.
Yeah, and kind of what I want to really talk about is this big step that you've made into writing a book about this very subject, and it's your first book, isn't it?
Yes, it's my first book. Many times while writing it, I thought this is not only my first book, this is my absolute last book. Never again. Yes, it's my first book, but I'm not so sure it's my last book anymore.
Okay. Oh, so while you were in the process, it felt painful, but now that you've had time to reflect and think about it, you know, maybe there's another idea you might want to explore, that sort of thing.
I just have a new idea, and I wonder if it's going to become nagging enough that I will have to put it in a book or not. Okay. My publisher thinks it's a good idea, so it's already slightly they're slightly interested, so that's kind of encouraging.
Well,
but
that's always a good start. Yeah.
Yeah, but while I was writing it, yes, I have to admit it was so painful that many times I just wanted it out.
All right. Well, tell me about those pain points. Can you describe any of them?
So what happened is I came up with this idea a few years ago. The reason I wanted to put it in a book is because I kept writing on this blog and I had like disparate sets of explanations in various publications about what it is. And then I realized that it's a lot more than just a few articles, and it's worth putting context around them and explaining to people, one, what was my experience in the industry and how I arrived at that. So it's a little bit of a personal account of how I've seen the industry grow. And then it jumps into why I think the industry needs fixing so that it can think about people's feelings and have banks become brands. So I wanted to have that explanation. A blog wouldn't have fitted, so it needed a book. But you said, why was it painful? Codes for so many reasons. First off, writing a book while you're in full-time employment is slightly challenging, to put it mildly.
Yeah, and with a family as well. Yeah.
Well, yes, yeah. And with a family, with a young family. So what I had envisioned at first, and I'll be very honest with you, was I will simply put together my blog posts, just kind of glue them together a little bit, send them to a publisher, and they will make a book out of it. That is not the case. That is not at all the case. In particular, because I found, so early on, I sat down, I put all of my blogs on a Word document, and I organized them by categories and topics and how well they would serve various ideas. And then I proceeded to not be able to go after that methodology, which I thought was every morning, you got to get into a routine. You wake up at a ridiculous o'clock, which I still do, and I did for the duration of the book, between 4:30 and 5:30 every morning. And then come rain or shine, you pick one of your blogs and you make a chapter out of it. I thought that's how we're going to go around this. Except I realized that reading my own writing about the topic seemed to take as long, if not longer, than rewriting what I meant with that.
Oh, why is that?
I am not sure. It's and also my ideas had evolved, and I would have had to rewrite so much of it that I found the first 2 or 3 blog things that I read to be important in the context, but so much more was coming out of me as I was reading them that there are some of the blogs actually like as a facsimile, as a snapshot.
Yeah. So you had some of your thoughts and ideas had moved on. So can you tell me how far back you went then with the first blogs? Are we talking a couple of years? Are we talking longer?
I can't actually answer that because the book is structured in explaining what FinTech is, the way I saw it. Yeah. Then it goes into kind of talking about essentially what is emotional banking and, what is a brand and why change culture. And then it goes into the method. So the entire part that's about the method was completely unwritten, of course. So that was pretty fun to write. And the fun thing is I actually wrote that bit first. And I realized that I really enjoy it. I love it. That is the most amazing bit. When you get into that writing haze, when you are on a wave and you're really just pouring out of your fingers,
and you don't want any interruptions. You're in a flow. You're in sort of a mindset, aren't you? Yeah,
that's amazing. It's almost like I hear that from programming as well. Like when you get into the zone for like an hour or two and you do your best work, and that was fun. However, rereading a blog, structuring ideas, editing content was not fun. So to kind of keep myself even through the process, I would say a good 80% of the book is written from scratch, maybe 70.
Well, that's a lot. That's a lot. And you got that guidance. Did you come to that conclusion yourself first, or did you get some feedback from your publisher or an editor?
My editor is amazing, and they're a really big publishing house, Palgrave Macmillan. So they're a really well-known editor. They're not a corner shop. With that said, they're rather new to the topic. Everyone is. And I could see by how whenever they would suggest any edits, I wasn't very sure that we were on the same page and they got what I meant. And you'd know how that is because I sound all over the place and it's hard to make me clear.
I would never say such a thing.
But they never really had edits towards kind of where the content should go. They did ask me several times. They helped me structure it from the beginning. They wouldn't even kind of accept a book proposal until they felt it was structured correctly. I made one big change over for the structure, sent it to them, and they were all on board. I didn't get a lot of guidance, to be honest with you, because nobody else wrote a book about culture in banking before, so they didn't have a lot to refer to. But with that said, kind of the way it evolves as you write it is, in my mind, I remember the morning when it clicked in terms of structure. That's why I made a big change.
Yeah, and that's the one thing that they could guide you on, wasn't it? The actual structure of how to get a book off the ground, regardless of content.
Probably, or at least maybe if they could have warned me that it takes, to my mind, what it takes. Number one is a lot of discipline. So if you don't have put in place this kind of schedule, draconic of wake up and sit in front of a keyboard, you're not going to get it out the door. But what they did help immensely with is I had an immensely tight deadline. So I can't remember when I started working with them, but I think I signed around June, I would like to say. I can't remember for sure. I got the deal around June, and they had to have it by the end of December.
Wow. And did it feel exciting, frightening, or a little bit of both to have that deadline?
Both. But nothing exciting about it. It was just something new. But I'm glad it was there. If they said, here, take your time, send it back to us when you can, I would have never finished.
Yeah. And I guess a lot of people have that because I've read statistics where people give up on a book more than finish the book. So many people start a book and never, ever finish it.
It's not a pleasant process. A lot of the times, some bits are very much fun. So again, that hour or two when you really write, really pour it out, that's fun. But those are the smaller bits of it. Because what you don't know as a new author, for instance, what struck me the most is once you're done, right, which is, again, not an easy thing. Once you're done, you send it to them, and then another bit of work starts. that I knew nothing of, where you have to come up with references for every word. You have to show annotations. You have to have an index. You have to have permissions for every word and every picture in the book.
Yeah.
There's an amount of administration in writing a book that I had no clue about that can take you weeks to put together.
Yeah, the Harvard referencing style and all that sort of thing. Yeah. No one ever tells you that, do they?
No.
No one ever tells you. Yeah. So let me go back just a step before you actually signed up with these amazing publishers. Obviously, been really good for you. Before you got to that, did you consider self-publishing or not?
I considered it, and then I decided against it.
Why?
Because I felt like it wasn't giving me enough of a platform. Like, okay, let's be honest here. I'm a woman in the industry, which hasn't been incredibly easy. I am jumping in between technologies of doing things and thinking things, between technology and cultural transformation, which is a very challenging place to be. The topic of the book has never been touched before. It's a brand new conversation. It's all about fluffy feelings, things. The last thing I needed was for me to self-publish it in a corner, or for some unknown person to kind of put it in a brown paperback.
Yeah, and no one will ever see it, kind of thing. Yeah,
right. Yeah. It's just I didn't feel like the brand for a novel. Of course, you just want to get the book out, but for something that you have a need to put in front of many people, you have to have as high of a publisher profile as you can get, I think. And
also, I guess, in the financial industry, books are strong currency still in terms of marketing.
Right.
Yeah.
To prepare that out, I didn't think about this a lot, but I got a call from a BBC interviewer the other day, and I was saying to a group of friends called the FinTech Mafia that they wanted to market me as the first woman to have written a book in FinTech, which is not true. So I asked them for examples real quick. They gave me a few examples. And I looked into them. There are some books that in the finance point of view, and there are some books coming out now about blockchain and Bitcoin and stuff. But if you stop to think about it, books that really did well are Chris's, Brett's, Dave Birch's, and kind of that's almost an exhaustive list.
Yeah,
I mean, there hasn't been a big FinTech book that really took off for a while.
I've had a look myself, and there's an awful lot of foreign language books. Have you noticed that? So in FinTech, you find non-English books, which I found quite unusual.
I think that makes sense. I think that's local people feeling like they probably can't really join in the bigger conversation and finding an easier outlet, getting a publisher to publish them in their
That's
language.
an interesting perspective. Yeah, I didn't think of that. Yeah, and that's why I'm interviewing you, because you have. So let's talk about personal branding. Okay, so and the importance of it. I mean, you're someone who has written many blogs. You run your own blog, and then you've taken this step to write your first book, and you're active on social media. Let's talk about personal branding and how important it is in your industry, but in general as well.
Right. I think that's a broad question, but to give you a little bit of history of how I ended up in that situation, I feel like I never took a decision. I'm going to become a public persona and this is how I work at it. It's never been that. It's been a lot more organic and accidental. So I started on social media as the voice of Meniga to a degree, or just kind of to get in contact with people on the company I was working for's behalf, right?
Yeah.
Except as a company and as a young marketeer and someone that wants to make a brand in B2B for our industry, there was no reason for me to be speaking from the brand's perspective. Then nobody would have listened to that. It had to have a human, a face, a real voice on it. So that's why I even opened my Twitter account. It was to create the brand of the company, right? To get in contact with the right people. At that time, the conversation on Twitter, I kid you not, may have had 20 people in it.
Right.
So there was maybe 100 profiles on Twitter were FinTech profiles, but 20 people were in a conversation.
Okay.
So it was really quiet, really clear. You could literally tell what events there were by just looking at those 20 people and understanding a hashtag, getting in a conversation with them. Now, becoming known to them was a thing because these people were busy. They had hundreds of followers. not more than that. But once they remarked that there's some value there, they would be friendly, they would guide you. I remember as someone breaking into the industry, a conversation with Bradley Lamer over Skype, which kind of shook my world. I still believe in some of the things we kind of arrived at together in terms of technology back then. So I got in contact with all these people. They became really close friends over the years. And that's kind of how it started, what got me in the conversation. But then I realized that that's a very open conversation. People could literally just join it. In fact, part of my cultural transformation method is based on that, which is, it's called the Build a Voice program. And it's asking bankers to get involved in that conversation because it's a good one. It's an addictive one. These days, it's a very hard to navigate one because it's now flooded with newcomers. And we're many years later. FinTech is supposedly a hot topic. So you have now probably thousands of people in a conversation about FinTech on the same hashtags instead of the 100 that I
met. Yeah, so it's moved away from that, perhaps an echo chamber into, it's spilled over. So more people are understanding it and wanting to be a part of that community.
Right, and some of them are really valuable and some of them are just noise. And for people that are new now, I feel it's like a lot harder to make a name on Twitter just because, one, they start with 5 followers, and that's a problem as compared to, the few thousand that some others have or few tens of thousands that us old-timers have. So they have less of a platform to begin with. Secondly, they are forced to do a lot of kind of retweeting and just kind of I can give you the name of it, but it's not very elegant. So putting that type of stuff out there is completely worthless. I mean, a retweet from Bradley Lamer back in the day was because he found something and we all read it. A retweet from some other people today is completely worthless and is spam. So unless people on Twitter understand, new people on Twitter understand that they need to produce their own content. They need to be creators of an opinion, of a point of view. And the easiest way to get that out is through a blog. Then they won't be able to continue, or I don't think they'll make much of a splash. Right.
And we're saying that Twitter is still very important in this conversation as well, aren't we?
Right. I would say that Twitter is still one of the big channels. I think LinkedIn is coming up the ranks. I remember a time when nobody would even talk about LinkedIn. I mean, it was just, I'm so old, LinkedIn didn't mean anything. It was just a place where you put your data. There was no conversation. There were no groups. There was no posting, nothing.
Yeah.
It's taking a little bit of, but I think it's going to take the same turn, which is soon enough, unless people are actually making the content, just channeling something without even putting a word next to it is not going to be good enough.
Yeah, and LinkedIn is changing as well, isn't it? Because it felt like it was, I don't know, a recruitment platform, for HR people. But I think it's recognised that it perhaps fell down that hole a little bit and needed to be a little bit more of a community driver. Right. And I've heard that they're going to change groups, so groups becomes better, and it's not just empty news channels, because that's what it feels like. You go in a group now and you're a member of this group of maybe 100,000 people, but it's the same old people posting the same old rubbish or trying to get you to go to their events or that sort of thing. So social media has to kind of improve to help us personally brand our messages, I guess.
Right. I wonder if they're going to be able to really turn groups around. I wonder if it's not a little bit too late for them to do that. To be honest with you, I think they did an amazing job to even rebrand themselves as a content channel, right? They didn't quite exist. It wasn't until they had to battle Medium that they realized, unless we put something out there that makes it incredibly easy to write, it's not going to happen. And then this kind of your daily feed with the posts and the news and the retweets and stuff, that's the newer bit, right?
Well, I didn't think they could do that, and they've managed to, haven't they? So maybe they could turn groups around.
That would be necessary, I think. I mean, you and I have been on the internet, and many of the people listening to this would have been on the internet long enough to remember news groups and to remember MIRC and conversations in bulletin boards and live journal and kind of where the conversation really was. And you had these forums, right? I still miss forums. Nothing really replaced forums, right? You had the forums where you had the real conversation. I don't know if there are any around anymore. I'm not sure. But the conversation seems to have moved between Twitter, maybe Reddit for the newer generation, not for us oldies. But I don't think that Reddit and Snapchat and so are necessarily kind of lending themselves to a professional environment. So to my mind, it still stays between LinkedIn and Twitter if you're looking for a place to brand yourself professionally and not personally.
Yeah, I mean, there is Quora as well, isn't there? You know, that sort of answering people's questions. So you're becoming an expert in your field by answering other people's queries. I mean, I've heard that that's quite a good platform as well. All right, let's get a bit lighter to end with. So when I go back to your writing structure and how you really approach this book, and you said you got up at 4:30 in the morning. I mean, that's crazy early. Is that because the rest of your day was just going to be mega packed?
Yes, because if you write a book while you're in full-time employment, you need that. Also because I felt like that's the one time in the day. It's much easier for me to do stuff in the morning than it is to do stuff very late at night.
Well, that was my next question. I was going to ask if you experimented. Did you experiment with doing an early morning? And you know, were different ideas coming out, or did you get most of your ideas and your discipline by over breakfast? Yeah.
No, I just realized very early on that one of the other, I have to decide on either really late at night or really early in the morning. It had to be while child and hopefully dog and everyone else was sleeping. It had to be one of the two. And really late at night, it felt like I really would be too beat down to attempt it even. So I would wake up. I didn't need to wake up at 4:30, but I would force myself through half an hour of breathing, yoga, and meditation first, which
getting in the frame of mind. Yeah.
Just because it really clears up your thoughts for a second. And then I would sit in front of the computer. And honestly, I've had days, and I said this to everyone, it's much more important to just do the routine than it is to really write. So I've had many days in which I would be in complete writer's block. And the temptation is, why don't I just sleep in? Or why don't I go back to bed? Or why don't I go into the office earlier? But realistically, unless you sit there, you read through something and it's going to come to you, or it's not, but at least you still have the discipline and the routine, which is the backbone of getting this thing done.
Yeah. And did you have a soundtrack? Did you have the radio on in the background, or are you a silent writer?
I didn't even think about that until now. I guess I am a silent writer. I guess it has to be slightly quiet.
Yeah, because I listened to a podcast last week. I can't remember who it was, and she said she had when she was writing, she would sit down and she would do 3,000 or 4,000 words a day, and she would play the same music from beginning to end. So she had a soundtrack to her writing.
Maybe that would have been helpful. Then again, to me, it was a lot more about control, that everyone is still sleeping and everything's still right in the world, and I can just do this thing. So, yeah.
Well, it's fantastic. So tell me about the tools that you used as well. Were you on a little MacBook? Did you have? Were you in the smallest room in the house? What was the environment like?
I'm very fortunate. I have a proper big. I've always had a really big home office, so with a great view and the right light, and it's all pretty decorated and so on. So that's very helpful. Tools-wise, I was convinced I can only write this on my Mac. However, I took a new job in between finishing the book, and in this new job, they insisted that I go to client meetings with a Dell. And I was completely against it at first. I was looking at this thing with such disdain, and it's horrible. I don't know how to use any Windows. I can't do this. And at first, I had about a week in which I didn't write at all, because I would be traveling with only the other machine and think, well, I don't have my machine. I don't have my home. Yeah. I can't do this. But realistically, then I realized that I'm missing on deadlines, or my own deadlines, my internal deadlines. By the way, I should say this, and it's important for anyone wanting to write one. Get a Trello board.
A Trello, yeah.
And organize this thing as if it's a project that you got to get through. Like this chapter, it's still in writing, it's got to get to done. So when I realized that I'm falling back, I started just once or twice trying to write on the Dell, and I found it surprisingly pleasant to write on. Those keys were a lot nicer to touch than my Mac. I can't believe I say that in front of my Mac. I hope it doesn't listen. The only thing I didn't change is I found ages ago, when I signed the contract for the book, when I got the deal, I found online a Mac, or a laptop cover. That's a Ted Baker laptop cover. And I put any machine that I'm writing on top of that cover before I start writing. Right. It has a typewriter on it. It's really pretty. It has like a really old school typewriter on it. Yeah. And it just makes me feel more writery than I really am.
That's nice. Yeah, I like that. That's a nice anecdote. So getting in the right frame of mind and I also think it's important to find out from you whether you worked in the cloud or whether you saved locally.
Very good point. Very good point. I used to save everything locally and in a very horrible fashion until I realized that I will need to work on the other machine as well. I will be traveling. The book won't wait for me to be doing this job. And also, it's unsafe to have them on one machine. So the entire book is in Google Docs.
Right. Yes. And you don't have that fear because, I've spoken to people who are very mistrusting of the cloud. They think someone's going to kind of break into the account and steal. Yeah, and suddenly half of your book comes out next week without you knowing it. It's that kind of thing.
Oh, okay. I didn't even know. It hasn't occurred to me. I'm rather data permissive, I'm afraid, in general. And two, I do trust the cloud very much.
Me too. Yeah.
It's so immensely convenient. I'll tell you, I didn't even change it for the location those chapters were in, the final chapters. That is a link I sent to my publisher, and that's how we got this book published. Yeah. I mean, the nightmare that it would have been to do it any other way, I can't even imagine it.
Yeah. No, that's really good, actually. Yeah, that's really good. Really good to know also that a publisher will accept that because, I guess some first-time book writers may be thinking, I'm going to have to find a printer. I'm going to have to staple this all together and put it in a binder with my name on it. I'm going to have to post it to myself to make sure I've got the copyright. Does all of that still happen, I wonder? I guess not.
I don't think so. I doubt it. I mean, they would have to then get it in a digital format themselves. How would they do that?
Yeah,
I don't even know how
exactly.
they did before the cloud.
Yeah. Do you know what? This has been absolutely delightful talking to you. How do people find you? Let's find out how people find you. So
sure. I mean, I'm probably slightly the easiest person to find online. DuenaBlomstrom.com, emotionalbanking.com, and there's a link to the book on both those sites. People can get it from Amazon or they can get it directly from the publisher, which is probably nicer to the publisher. Amazon has enough money already.
Yeah, I think so.
And anywhere out there, and in particular at Duena Blomstrom on Twitter, if anyone gets in touch who's listened to this podcast, I'm more than happy to extend the 20% off discount for them.
Oh, that's lovely. What a nice gesture. And I'm going to put some links in the description as well so people know exactly where to go that they can do that. So thank you so much. And I'm going to leave you now. So you're practically on your junket, aren't you? Your press junket. You're like a little bit like some of these stars from Marvel where they go to the hotel and we all get half an hour with you. Because
I'm on a little bit of a press tour, yes.
Because you're doing lots of promotion for this book at the moment, aren't you?
Yes, I'm very fortunate that I know the industry and people kind of know me enough that they're interested to hear about it. That's brilliant because with or without my book, my game is not only to sell a book. My hope is that I can literally change an industry with this book. So yeah, the more people that hear about it, the more people that think about culture, the better for everyone.
So that was Duena Blomstrom. It's hard not to pick up on her passion and enthusiasm for what she does, and it's one of the things I love about her. I can't wait to read her new book, which is called Emotional Banking, and I'm leaving lots of links in the description to this episode so you can find out about it too. If you've had fun listening, feel free to rate the show on iTunes or leave comments in whatever podcast player you use. I look forward to the next episode already. See you soon.